Hello, and welcome to Educational Triage, where we discuss issues in alternative education. This is a discussion about teaching, by teachers, for teachers, and others who are interested in the alternative education world. We hope you find today's episode relevant, engaging, and useful. And if you do, please subscribe. I'm Tony Hunt, and I'm here to help guide you with the help of my friends Christy and Philip. And here we are, a wonderful new episode with Philip Summers and Christy Goodell. How are you both?
Great.
Aloha. Doing good.
Ready to go.
I know, when the moon is no longer full, and yet the world is still as crazy as it was. So, today's episode is what makes a great alternative education teacher as opposed to a great mainstream teacher. So that has some implications, yes? Or,
Yeah.
I thought so.
Well, because, tell me more. Tell me more what you mean by that.
Oh, well, the first thing I thought of was I got some experience as an alternative ed teacher, and then I thought, I don't have that much experience as a mainstream teacher, and that puts me at a disadvantage. And that also put me at a sort of, well, I don't want to criticize mainstream teachers as far as that goes either. So I have a lot to learn about being a mainstream teacher. So I thought, maybe I should listen more than talk, or I don't know. That's what I thought. There's a lot in common. I thought, for sure. Yeah, as far as teaching goes.
Most definitely.
Oh, for sure.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
So I have a couple of lists here, and one of them is from articles, and so and I've got another one from students. So let me start off with what the students told me.
Yeah. Can't
when I
wait to
interviewed
hear how they
them.
describe me.
Good stuff.
They said, yeah, no. Okay, so for mainstream, what they said was a sense of humor was really important, that they're relaxed, they're accessible, and they actually one of them used a teacher that I never would have guessed in a million years was this way. They mentioned teachers that on our staff who never in a million years would I have suspected that they would have been so incredible. They said that they have understanding and empathy. That's a huge one.
Okay.
They listen. Yep. They believe in equity and equality. They listen. Make connections over and above academics.
Yeah. That's
okay.
That's hard for a lot of teachers to do. That's really hard.
Definitely. They make one-on-one connections. They feel comfort in knowing, the student feels comfort in knowing that they will come to them because the students have anxiety about raising their hands and asking for help.
So like approachability kind of thing, like the teacher will come to
accessibility. Yeah.
Accessibility,
yeah. Relatability.
Again.
Mm-hmm. Even-tempered. They don't yell and scream and turn into Maleficent in a bad mood. Non-authoritarian, but they have control.
Authoritative,
and it's a different
not
kind.
Authoritarian. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They put boundaries on friendship. And I said, what do you mean by friendship? And they said on the relationship, they have a really good relationship with us, but they put boundaries on that. And they're very clear boundaries. They're a listener with empathy. They know what they're teaching with more than just one way of doing it. So they know how to reach kids with different learning styles.
Know how to reach kids with different learning styles.
Well,
mm-hmm.
Good.
Philip?
This is exactly what I was saying, I guess, is that these are all the qualities of good teachers. these are all the
Yes.
things I've ever aspired to be and
Mhm.
tried to be. These are all the
Mhm.
things that the students told me that they wanted from good teachers. Yeah,
Yeah.
mainstream or
They're
alt
able
ed. Yeah,
they're able to jump student to student and accommodate each one. So maybe
yeah.
they're working with the kid and they're joking with them, and then they can do a complete mind flip with the next one and say, "You you look like you had a really rough day.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk about it?" And then be able to accommodate that student and make them feel welcome and necessary and heard. And then they can pop over to somebody else and say, "Hey, good job last night. I watched you play that game." I mean, they're just constantly doing. They're agile. They can do mental gymnastics,
Yeah.
which is really important for alternative ed too. And they're personable. They're relatable. You can talk to them. They can be trusted, and they push you for success. That was another big one.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to go out of their way for help, so a kid knows that they can always reach out and talk to them.
That's good.
Um, they teach. They teach more than just the curriculum. They give options to do the work, and that doesn't mean options within the work. It's, you know what? I know you can do this, and I want you to do it, but that's your responsibility. So they also treat them as adults, and they don't get
Yeah.
mad at them if they don't get the work done. They're supportive. They help them to succeed, and always happy to have you around. They pay attention and they care about your well-being, and it's more than just school. They actually follow through with what they say and or promise. So there's a consistency there.
Yeah, consistency and a reasonable consistency too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what to expect. That helps. That helps a lot. They like that, even if they know it's somewhat of a butt kicking. They know that it's going to be a reasonable butt kicking, and after it's over with, they know that you're not going to hold them like, okay, remember that time. They know it's over with,
Right.
and onward we go.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're
that's
not
really
gonna hold a
important.
grudge.
Yeah, no
Yeah. Like you're
grudges.
not gonna.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of like that. We did workshops a long time ago, but like the different types of teachers, and one is the warm demander, right? You're approachable and you're caring, kind of like
Mhm.
what they talked about, but you're holding them to the standards, and you're expecting them to do it, but you're understanding if they can't, or if they're having
Mhm.
a bad day. Yeah, that's in. Those are. I'm pleased to hear all the different traits that the students said.
Yeah. I went through,
Hmm.
I interviewed a lot of students. So it was just fascinating. And then I said, okay, let's talk about alternative ed. And I said, I don't know if this is your only alternative ed setting, but what have you learned about alternative ed? So don't just go with where you are now, but how would
Mm-hmm.
this play out for you at another alternative setting? Or what is it that we do here that might be different? And I'm not looking for kudos. If you have any criticisms, I want to hear them. And so they said, well, you're more of a mentor than a teacher.
Mm.
Okay,
And
Nice.
nice.
we feel welcomed, and there's this recognition because every time that we walk through the door it's like, good morning, how are you doing? And if we're doing well, that's great. If we're not, oh, let's go check in, and they are taken care of. It's very relaxed, but they know what the rules are, and they know what the structures are, so they can work within those. It's respectful. We educate when they do something wrong. We tend to educate. We don't punish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like
Um,
teachable moments, right?
Oh,
exactly.
and mistakes. I
Um,
mean, teachable mistakes moments.
Yeah.
well, yeah, yeah. Um, we push them.
Yeah,
They like to
yeah.
be pushed, to get their work done, knowing that they do have graduation on the horizon, and that we're there to help support them, and we can't do much if they don't do their part.
Mhm.
Um, so they're held accountable. We're stricter with actual consequences. So
Really?
yeah,
That's what they said?
yeah.
Did they kind of give
Yeah.
examples? Like, because it kind of goes against, not necessarily against, but it's a little bit like it's a comforting, like the previous statements you said, it's
Right.
comforting,
Well,
it's also stricter. That's kind of surprising me.
Well, we follow through with what we say we're going to do. So let's say that a student earned 15 tardies, and we don't have the capacity to run detentions right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do? I mean, the other thing is that we stay after for 2 hours at the end of the day, and we work a 10 to 11 or 12-hour day because a student decided that they weren't going to come in on time. So what we end up doing, and we speak to them about the responsibility and if they had a job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how this is actually something that they're doing for themselves, and the payoff is their graduation. But if they're going to consistently be tardy, then we go on a contract, and they're given a certain number of tardies, and then if they continue with those tardies, then they just won't be coming back at the end of the semester.
Do you think that's part of the motivating factor that is available in alternative programs, that if you don't meet the expectations, you won't stay, right? Whereas if they're in a mainstream setting,
yeah. Well, that
right?
was exactly
if I'm not doing well in my
if
I'm in my
mainstream program
English
in high
class
school
and I'm not doing it,
completion, I would do that. We had the program going with high school completion, and I had a strict attendance policy. And if it got to a point where you weren't in a contract and you violated the contract, I would have a frank conversation. I'd say, one more absence, and I'm going to have to let you go. And I had some pretty extremes in there. I had one kid call me from jail. he called me from jail. Yeah, and he said, "Look, Summers, I'm calling you. I'm in jail." And I said, "What? Okay, hold on. You're calling me from jail?" He said, "Yeah, I don't want you to kick me out." And I said, "Okay, hold it, time out. You got one phone call, and I'm your phone call." He said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, give me the numbers of the two people or one person you want me to call. I'll call them. And don't worry, I won't kick you out." It was that serious to him. I told him not to do anything on Halloween, and he did, and he got arrested. But the point was, he called me. Another kid, I'd let go. I'd say, "I'm sorry, I have to let you go." And when I did let go kids, the funny thing was, without almost exception, maybe one or two kids over years, 7 or 8 years, without exception, I said, if I let you go, I want you to go away and think about it and come back when you're ready. And they came back, and every one of them graduated. Like with record time.
Well,
Yeah. It was crazy.
Well, as we tell our kids, I tell the kids, look, if you don't make it, you have to go one more quarter. If you get booted at the semester, then you have to prove that you can actually do this for one quarter. And then we'll have a brief interview. You can come back into the program. And they said, but we'll be behind in credits. And I said, that's your choice. You need to start thinking about that now. But then we will welcome you back with open arms. But then if you continue with this same stuff once you come in, there's no coming back. So, because you'll be gone. And so and once, the interesting thing is it only takes one person to fall down that hole.
And when
they all see it, and it happens every bloody year. This year it hasn't happened yet, but it almost did. So people are starting to get the idea, but it's so hard when you're coming back from the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had cases where I've had parents constantly make excuses for their kids, and it's like, you know what? If I don't get the call, if I don't see them, they're going to be gone, because I can't run an internship with somebody who never shows up.
Right.
Right.
And so finally I called the mother and I said, okay, this is it. And she said, well, it's going to have to wait because I'm here in the hospital and I just had my appendix out. And I said, well, I'm just informing you because, and she said, how could you do this while I'm on my hospital bed? And I said, we kind of strung this out forever and nothing changed. So, even though this is it feels extreme, it was still going to happen.
Right. I mean, she wasn't in her hospital bed for the previous 3 to 4 months where the kid was not meeting expectations. The timing of the being informed was unfortunate, but the
Right. But
behavior would
then,
have been over a marked period of time.
right. And then the kid called me about half an hour later and he said, my mom says that you kicked me out. And I said, well,
No.
yeah. And I've been after you. And he said, well, I don't think that's fair because you didn't talk to me first. I said, how many messages have I left you? And he
Yeah.
said,
Mhm. Yeah.
well, I didn't think you were all that serious because teachers usually aren't that serious. And I said, well, your mom's in the hospital. And he said, no, she's not. She's right over here.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Ah!
We
Mhm.
get parent scammers too. Okay. Shall we move on?
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Okay. We treat them as a person and not as a number or a little kid.
Uh-huh.
In other words, we treat them as adults.
Mm-hmm.
They like the fact, well, this is about me.
Ah.
I'm blunt and I don't
What?
sugarcoat, but they said, we know that you're on our side and that you want the best for us. And I said, well, thank you. And I think my cohort's pretty much the same way this year too. We are their friend, advocate, and mentor, and they know that they can rely on us to take care of them. They can count on us no matter what. They say a great alternative ed teacher will take time to know you and understand what you need and will
Mm-hmm.
help you get it.
Aw.
We're willing to kick them in the donkey with love.
Yeah. Hold them accountable. Yeah. Teach them how to be held accountable too, not just go, I'm holding you
Yes.
accountable. It's like, what is it? And why are you doing this to me? And I don't even understand what this is. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
That's like the expression, kick him in the donkey.
Yeah. We kick him in the donkey and tell them how and why we're doing it.
No, they usually know. Help them find their own way to success, to their own own
Mhm.
personal success. That a great alternative ed teacher will care and pay attention to them and their needs.
Mhm.
And again, follow through with what's said and promised. So there we
Go
are.
figure.
Those are
Jeez.
good. Very
Treat them like people growing up.
enlightening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting is, and I was listening, and as they were telling me these things, and I was thinking, are you talking about mainstream teachers? Or are you talking about people that want to work in here? Because,
Mm.
I mean, there are some wonderful, wonderful teachers that are out there. And then there's other teachers that the kids treat them as numbers and that they don't really count as much of anything. So, but yeah. So, okay. So
Well,
now we have the
I want
12.
to put a story in here real quick. Stephen Sondheim just died, and I like Stephen Sondheim.
Yeah.
I actually
Oh, I
found out
love
that I
Stephen Sondheim.
adore
Yeah.
Stephen Sondheim. Yeah, and it occurred to me that he's somewhat of a soundtrack of my life. I ever since I picked up a quadraphonic copy of the soundtrack from Company with Dean Jones and Richard Kimbrough and amazing
Oh my
people.
Yeah.
quadrophonia.
It was quadraphonic, and I never did play it on a quadraphonic player, but I love his music, and I saw interviews of him, and it occurred to me he was a teacher. He just I watched him direct and I watched him talk to people, and the way he told the story of how he went to like Oscar Hammerstein and he with his score as a 16-year-old and said, okay, here, what do you think of it? Really, what do you think of it? And he said, I'll look at it. And he came back to him and said, it's awful. Honestly, it's like a 16-year-old wrote it. He goes, but I'm going to treat you like a professional. And he sat down at the piano and they went for 2.5 hours and he treated me like he would treat a professional. And he picked it apart and he told me what was wrong with it and what I could correct and what I could improve, and I soaked it in, and I felt that I could do that with other people, and that's what I've always done, and that's what you always do, and that's what he was a teacher. And I always watched the way he'd watch his own performances, and people would tell him how much they adored his work and how they thanked him, and he would just crouch his head in his hand and just look at him with a smile like, I'm thank you, but of course. I'm a teacher and you're a student and this is our interchange and I'm enjoying it as much as you are. And I just, that he was a teacher and that's what he was. And I'm proud to be of the same ilk, I miss him. He was good and he was very,
Well,
very good, that he enjoyed
he
teaching.
left a legacy.
Yeah.
He left a wonderful legacy.
Yeah, for sure.
And he
There's
shared it
so
like
many shows
crazy.
with
Yeah.
him.
Oh, man.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness, there are
yeah.
so many of his shows that I just love.
Oh, his
Yeah, when you
music
do like
was,
when you look at how many he's done, you're like, oh my gosh, all those were
hmm
his.
the
I mean,
lyrics
it's-
were amazing.
I mean,
another 100 people
well,
just got off of the
Sweeney
train when he
Todd
got
was
off of the
pure
bus.
genius.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Into the Woods,
Mhm.
Promises,
Yep.
Company. Yeah,
Yeah.
he did so much.
And if you
Yeah.
asked him, he would share it with you. He'd go, sure, I'd love to look at that. I'd love share it with me, please. He'd
Mhm.
always have time to
Being
share
Very
col-
approachable.
advice and
collaborative,
to teach you.
approachable, all those
Mhm.
things that Tony just mentioned, the list of descriptors right
Patty
there.
Yeah.
LaPone was crying. She was
Yeah.
just saying, all I can say is thank you. And then she started to say more. And he goes, no. He goes, I can see what you're telling me. You're welcome. And he just kind of put his hands down. And it's like he was just kind of humble. And it was just like, you're welcome. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, he was a teacher. And yeah, he's missed. It's good. Anyway.
But he lived a really good life, and he gave
Oh, yeah.
from
He
his good life.
gave. That was it. That was it. He gave. He wanted to give. He wanted to share with you what he had to give. And that's what teachers do. I
Mhm.
think they want to go, hey, check this out. Check this out.
Mm-hmm.
And people are attracted to that. They want to learn from that.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, geez, man, the guy
So,
was mentoring from forever ago. But go ahead. Sorry.
okay, not to change the subject, but now we're going to go from other people's points of view as far as what makes a great teacher. And these are from online, and one of them is, okay, this is another list, and this is how teachers and other people view good teachers should be: that they act with integrity. Always a good thing.
Check. I'm just kidding.
They bring a wide range of skills and talents to teaching. So they're able to parlay in a variety of modes, I suppose. They build links at national and international levels in education. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, that one
Do
I
they
paused
publish?
on when I saw that list. I'm like, yeah, like, right. Am I
Right.
or being aware, connecting, making the links?
Maybe, and making it more diverse, maybe. They're committed to professional development in education. And this is one that I think is really pertinent because
Mm-hmm.
there's been almost an apathy. You don't see many teachers rushing off to do professional development anymore, to go to conferences, to learn more about what it is that they can do. Excuse me. Committed to the work. I think a lot of teachers, most of the teachers I work with, are very committed to their work.
Right. Agreed.
And it's easy to know who's not really, because they don't last. They communicate effectively with others.
Well, you have
So-
to, right? If you
Well-
I mean, if you can't communicate effectively with others, your coworkers and or your students, then that is going to be a rough
mean-
ride.
When they kick you out of their office because they wave their hands around and they talk about how busy they are.
Or when a coworker doesn't pay attention to the other coworker saying, "Hey, I'm on a real tight deadline," and then they just pull up a chair. Is that the scene?
Yeah.
Where's that on our
story
list?
I did hear a story about that.
All hypotheticals, of course. Yeah, where's that
They
on our list?
They contribute to course design and structure.
Yeah. Well,
They're
it's the
not-
buy-in, right? If you want your kids to have buy-in, you got to have buy-in in it as well.
Well, you have to know
Okay.
what you're doing. You can't just sit there and have somebody else do something and then read off of a script.
Right.
And I've worked with too many of those.
Mm-hmm.
They contribute to publications on education. And I see that as more of a senior level kind of post-secondary, but I do work with some people who do some of that. They create a climate of trust. That's huge. Because if kids can't trust you, you've lost them.
You know, going kind of back to what you're saying about the publications and education, you could kind of make a little tangent to that. Like, I think being involved in your school in some aspect, right? You are part of either a committee, or you're an advisor for a club, or you are doing outreach. Like, to me, I think you're showing devotion to the craft, and you're not just like, I'm going to show up at 8, I teach in my little classroom, and the bell rings, and then I leave, and then I don't do any other stuff that's building, right? You're not going to because the students know, oh my gosh, I saw you at my wrestling match. Yeah, I want to kind of, right? Like, they see that, and that's those connections. So I think it's not necessarily a publication, but I'm kind of going a little off the rails on it, but like, you have to kind of go a little beyond just the class. I'm teaching in my room, and then the bell rings and I'm done, and I take off and I don't do anything else. That's really hard to do.
Well, you could also say that, well, what we're doing right now, we could say that that's a publication.
Yeah.
On education. You could, if you're doing something with professional development, you could say that. If you are contributing and doing guest speaking in other classrooms, if you are, there's so many different ways of publishing.
Right.
I think.
It doesn't have to be like a journal and,
right.
An educational tone kind of thing. But yeah.
Right.
Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead. Not sorry for interrupting. I'm not apologizing. Go ahead.
Demonstrates creativity in teaching strategies.
Oh, for sure, right? Like, if you if you can't adapt, you're gonna die, right? You have to be able to
adapt or die.
Oh, I was adapt or die, right? You have to be. I think, Tony, you were telling me this a long time ago. Like, what's the number one thing? You have to be flexible, and not just yoga, but you gotta
mental gymnastics.
Oh my gosh, because
you don't know what you're going to get. And somebody, I worked with this wonderful, wonderful man who's now dead. And he called me.
He didn't adapt.
Well,
he didn't adapt, so he's dead.
Well, he didn't adapt to something. I don't know. No.
Life.
No, but otherwise, I would have invited him on here because he
from the grave. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm being a little spitfire. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll mute myself.
Okay. So anyway, no, he called me and he said, I've got this kid. And I said, yeah, I know the kid very well. And he said, I cannot get this kid to do the work I need them to do. He said, how do we trick this kid into graduating? Because this kid doesn't seem to want to go down the straight and narrow path. And so we looked, and I said, look, the kid's doing all kinds of research, right? And he said, yeah, but I need this kid to do this for this thing. And I said, talk to the kid, find out, do they have enough information for that subject? And he said, well, they do. And I said, okay, give them the credit. He said, right. But how do we do the English? I said, they just fulfilled the competency and proficiency for writing research projects. I mean, she has like 25 pages of research already done and completed. And then we went through and we realized that we had what this kid was doing as opposed to directly attacking what she needed to do, that she actually had earned the majority of her credits in trying to, I can't call it passive aggression, but she was so involved in doing the research, and she would make an incredible researcher. And she ended up graduating. Yeah. And she was a little horrified that she had done that and a little shocked, but yeah.
She showed you.
So, well, she showed everybody. So, but we talked and he said, can we do these things? And I said, well, yeah, we can. And so we worked it out. And so it's being open to suggestion. It's being open to looking at things in a different way. and finding windows where maybe no windows were and making those work for you, I think. Leadership in teaching. How do you teach as a leader? There's a really good book. It's called The Tao of Leadership. And if you look at it, and if you start applying many of the things in there, it was given to me when I was doing work for teaching English as a foreign language, administrative work. And it was one of our required reads. And I ended up using it as a meditation every day and applying it to what I was doing in teaching. And it taught me a lot. It's really amazing. So that would be a good one. And I'll put the
another good book on leadership is Leaders Eat Last by Simon
Tell me
Sinek.
more.
Simon Sinek, a book called Leaders Eat Last. It's just basic premises of leadership. Really good modern version of it. You're just I forget the basic premises of it. There's also a one by Jocko Willink called Extreme Ownership. Just that the basic premise is that you're the leader, everything falls back to you at all times. And so it gives you about 8 different principles on how the leadership always falls back to you. And so if you're a willing acceptor of life, then that's a good way to go too. So it gives you a real good way of looking at things. It's basic premise. He was a SEAL too. Jocko Willink was a SEAL. He was also with
okay.
Yeah, task
A heart
force.
seal?
No, he was the kind that killed things. Over in Fallujah, yeah. He was clearing the streets, I believe, in Fallujah in Iraq with Task Force Bruiser in 2000. So yeah, he was badass. But yeah, it's Extreme Ownership is the name of the book. And then Simon Sinek is Leaders Eat Last is a really good book too.
Yeah. I feel like I've heard that name. Has he written other things?
Yes, he has. Yes. Yeah, he's really he really has an interesting way of looking at things. He does some YouTube stuff, if in case you're interested. Some good 7-minute stuff. Enrich the mind. Yeah. It's not so vague as far as, Book of 5 Rings or anything as far as leadership goes. But,
yeah. Okay. Discuss ideas in an organized way. And that way it's not chaotic and the kids can follow along.
Right.
Does not stereotype or speak negatively of others.
Yes.
Well, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emphasizes teamwork. Mm-hmm. Encourages an open and trusting learning environment. And that, I think, can be a real challenge because, well, you know how snide and nasty kids can be.
Yeah.
And also how anxious many of them are and how unwilling to trust because it's really difficult for them. But I think that what I found was, and it's really interesting, it took a semester, but I finally got this one class of students in English. This is in mainstream. I got it to where they could all work together and they had the best time doing it. So they had this collective shared experience. And what they had to do was, we had just finished Othello and they had to translate it, put it in their own words, and they were given certain sections of the play that they had to do. And they had to work. And once they got their scripts down, they had to merge with another group. And so they would, then they had to perform the whole play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So then they had to do the whole play. And people were, and then the other students were rating them because whichever, there was going to be an ensemble award. We did our own little Academy Awards. And so we did and so the kids, they had the best time. They really did. And I had one student who shied away from everything, didn't want to participate at the beginning of the year. And she was full front and center and she had the best time. And so for me, that was a proud moment when she sat there and said, I need to be part of this. And it's like, okay, go get them. and she just had the best time. So I think you can do it, but you have to be patient. And I think patience is a huge, huge um, talent to have in many
Mhm.
ways. And for me, I am one of the most impatient people I know. Um, as many of my coworkers will tell you that if I want something, I get it. Um, and part of that is because if I don't do it now, I'll forget.
Right.
So,
There's that
um,
happening. I think that
Yeah.
what you're saying is like it takes time. I think that's even more. I think that's more harder. Awful English. It's been compounded with COVID and CD and comprehensive distance
mhm,
learning, right? Because now they're coming off of 18 plus months of just doing school by themselves, and so now it's almost we have to teach them how to be a student in a classroom with other people in the same room, right?
yeah,
Like there's
hmm
just so much reteaching that we're having to do to get to a point where then like, okay, now you can embrace the curriculum. Like we have to teach you how to be a student and how, if you have a thought, you don't have to verbalize it all the time. You don't have to. You can, right? If you finish before other students, you don't need, it's not free time. Like we have to just teach them these basic
well,
strategies that they have not, because before if I finished and I was waiting, I would just go and get a snack because I can just walk around and I would, take a nap or
hmm
watch that, right? So that impulsivity didn't have any kind of natural boundaries for
well,
so
they're on.
long. And so we're having to unpack and reteach a lot of not necessarily bad habits, but just not successful student habits, right?
Well, they've learned TikTok etiquette.
Right.
So
Yeah, maybe.
this is the
Yes.
Emily post of TikTok, and these are the things that we do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Talk about
Um,
impatience, huh?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
Life
it's
in 30,
just,
less than 30 seconds.
oh, definitely.
it's a lot
Yeah.
right now. It's a lot.
A good teacher encourages and appreciates diversity.
Yes.
They
Yeah. Utilizes it too.
they encourage collaborative learning.
I think going back to the diversity too is just trying to also have your curriculum represent diversity as much as you can. And I think we as teachers are getting better, and I think the curriculum is getting better, but it's hard, right?
Well, here's what kids have told me though.
Sorry, just so what's that sound? Can of worms. Just open that one up. But yes.
Right. But what kids have told me is it needs to be authentic because they can spot inauthenticity a
Oh, for
mile away.
sure. Yes.
And they say there are so many teachers who will walk through the motions, but the kids don't believe them. The kids think they're only doing this because they think they're scoring points, but they don't really understand. They're not willing to listen. They're not willing to participate. There's a wonderful phrase: are you a resident or a visitor to the conversation? And worse
Yeah.
than them being visitors to the conversation, I think that they are more like the tourists looking through you pop the couple of quarters in and you kind of scan the horizon through those kind of
Oh, those telescope.
telescopes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
And
binoculars.
that's
Those
kind
big. Yeah.
I think that's how they feel that a lot of teachers do it because there are several teachers who don't know where to begin. They're terrified
Mm-hmm.
or they're just too lazy to actually find things out. And I
Yeah.
believe that we do have a very sheltered society
Mm-hmm.
where people do not have much experience in living in diversity. Everybody wants to live in the big house. They want to live in the fancy, good neighborhood.
Yep.
We don't have the kids who live in the ghettos while they're going to schools. They don't, you know,
Yeah.
that was a shared experience that most college students used to have. I don't know if they have it anymore, where you were
Being
poor.
in the at college,
Yeah.
being in.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I'm back with you. I thought you meant like everyone in college, their family and their history is poor. I'm like, well, that's not everybody. But I see what you're saying. Like
No,
the
no.
student themselves, you can't see me if you're
Yes.
listening, but like I'm just
Right.
going up my finger. Like I am my poor student because I don't have a lot of money and I'm Yeah, I see what you're
Exactly.
saying. Yes,
And
yes,
then
yes.
Well,
even
there's a
after
fine
college.
there's a fine line between being well-meaning and white paternalism. You know, it's kind of
Yeah,
interesting. It's
Yeah.
and appreciating diversity doesn't mean you have to overhaul everything. You can just do
yeah,
teeny tiny baby steps. If you're like in math, super basic, but I don't have to have every word problem with,
just
Jane
replace one of
goes
your
to,
novels with Nora Zeal-Hurston or
right.
something.
Just
You know, I mean,
mix up the
read it.
names of your examples
That's
a little
it.
bit.
There it
In your
is.
math
Yeah.
problems, you don't always have to have the same, like, Mike is going to the store and Jane has 5 apples. Like, you don't have to have the same, you know,
Right.
names all the time. You can make it or they don't always have to buy
Yeah.
apples. They can mix it up a bit. They're going
Yeah.
to get and just
Don't go
embrace.
too
Ask the
far.
kids what's some food you guys would like. Okay, I'm going to use that as an example. And I think there's ways you can do it in a little bit of way that recognizes the diversity without having to, like, we're all going to read a novel. I've never read it myself, but it's a diverse back. You don't, because then they were like, well, this is fake. But I think
Well,
there's
Taking
ways that
the
you
N
can make it.
bomb out
but if
of
you
Huck Finn is not the way to teach it. So that's not the way to do it. But
but if you go back a couple of episodes when
mhm.
we were talking about consensual learning,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think it was in the consensual learning episode where we talked about you can give students options. If instead of reading this book, they could read this other book and they could
Mm-hmm.
look for the
exactly,
same themes and the same
exactly.
ideas. And so
Yeah,
they could read more about, as one of my students said not too long ago, oh my God, I'm finally someplace where there are more people like me and I can see
Right.
people like me being successful.
yeah.
And I said, I thought you'd like it because this is something that you've been asking for. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, but you've got to work. So, and I think that if we cull our resources and if we talk to enough people and we don't shy away from things, and if we use our own imaginations and we can get book groups so that they can all talk. And so let's say that you have 5 kids who read this one book and 5 kids who read that
Right.
book and 5 kids who read that book.
Mm-hmm.
How does this theme present itself in each of those books? And
Yeah.
they're reading them together and they have to present those to the rest of the class, and they're all doing input, and so it's collaborative and it's diverse
Mhm,
and you're still teaching the same thing and you've got something bigger going on than what
mhm.
you had before, so
Yeah.
you take advantage of what you can.
It's just, I think sometimes,
Exactly.
like, you're right, teachers sometimes get worried, especially if you are, you look like me. I am a middle-aged white lady, right? And so I don't have the knowledge to do deep. Oh, we lost him.
I'm
Sorry.
here.
Okay, I'm like, sorry, listeners. He's like blocking the screen. But you can. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Not a shock here. Oh, but like little things. So like we do these brain breaks in our class because sitting in a classroom learning math for 90 minutes straight
Mm-hmm.
is extremely hard for some students. So we do lots of brain breaks. So instead of
Think.
doing like, what's everyone doing for Christmas, right? You can ask questions that embrace and appreciate diversity. What are you all doing for vacation? Just sometimes changing the word recognizes, like,
Right.
allows for people to share their backgrounds that are different than mine. Hey, what
Mm-hmm.
are you guys have a family meal? What's your favorite side dish? As opposed to be like, hey, what do you eat for your Christmas Eve dinner? Right? Like maybe not everybody has a big family dinner, but like everyone has a food they enjoy. And so,
Mm-hmm.
those kind of things. So I think you can do it in very um what's
Or what
the
are their traditions
low
over this
risk,
time of year?
right? Low risk embracing, and then you kind of build it up. Because if you just, right? Sorry, Tony,
Right,
what'd you
because you
say?
can well, you can ask if any of them have traditions during this time of year
Yeah,
and what those traditions might be. What are some traditional foods that you might be eating during this
right,
time of year?
right.
How many of you are going out of the country? Because this is a big time for a lot of our Central American students to be
Mm-hmm.
gone for
Yep,
a month or two
right,
and visit family down there, and then they return.
right.
And yeah,
We've talked about in
so
our trainings, like, there's those levels of the tree, right? Like there's the little branches, and then you can kind of get really into the roots.
mhm,
But if you go straight to like the deep roots of it, you haven't built that the trust right?
Right.
You
And you
mentioned
cut the
that,
taproot.
and you haven't. So you got to kind of ease in, and then you're right. It could take a long time to have kids open up, and there could be some on the first day who are like, "What?" And they'll just tell you everything.
Yeah, they
But-
will. Sometimes they'll tell you
Right.
too much. It's like, if you don't stop talking right now,
Yeah. Give someone else a chance. Yeah.
I'll be the first adult male to have a child arrested for sexual harassment. No, it happened once. This child, I go, you got to
What?
stop talking. I had one kid talking.
How did we get
about their
down that
sex.
road?
Where did this go?
It was like terrible.
Where is the
She
climate of
started
trust?
talking about her boyfriend and her, and I said, stop talking. And she wouldn't. I said, honestly, if you don't stop talking, it'll be the first case of an adult male having a teenage girl like cited for sexual harassment. Now stop it. It was horrifying.
Oh my goodness.
It was alt ed. It was, you know what I'm
Yikes.
telling you? It was alt ed. It was like, stop. Well, and then, you know, this happened. I'm going, no, that is not what we talk about at school. But yeah.
Oh, I think I know the student that you're talking about. This was several years ago. Like
it was way long ago, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think I know.
Yeah, it was horrifying.
I think I know.
That's way too much information for me to have on you. I do not want to do this.
Yeah, because sometimes students do overshare because they don't have those filters. So let me run through these really, really quickly.
Okay, go.
About what we have left. Collaborative learning encourages creative work, encourages input from others, listening deeply and giving credit for their contributions. Student growth with appropriate behavior-based feedback, encourages student questions and engagement in the process, encourages students to achieve their goals, encourages students to learn from their mistakes, encourages students to organize, analyze, and evaluate, encourages students to work in teams, and enthusiastic about work and about teaching, teaches students how to monitor their own progress, teaches students how to think, not what to think. Yeah. Because it goes with my philosophy, which is we're not really teaching subjects, we're teaching students how to access answers and how to evaluate what answers actually mean something.
Yeah.
And can actually play a part in their lives. Teaching is clearly presented and stimulates high-order thinking skills. They value students. They never belittle them. They work with passion, and they're keen to uphold the school's values. And from everything I've been seeing, there are fewer teachers that are on that last one because there seems to be a huge dissatisfaction with administrations across the country. But I know that there are those schools in which teachers feel valued. So what do y'all think? Is there one out of that last list that or would you say
not really? I mean, they were sort of like it was a good list of some very competent qualities. I keep thinking the first ones were very personal. When the kids said it, they were very personal, and we kind of went, yeah. And the second list, we almost had to qualify the first half of them. Like, yeah, I could kind of see that if you did this. And yeah, that one I could see.
Right.
Yeah, they were kind of big wordy. And the first ones were, of course, and of course, you know.
Yeah.
With the kids.
Well, like I said, the kids. Yeah, it was all relationship. And the second one's
being valued and being heard, right? Like not necessarily treated as an equal, but you're not treating them like a little bitty kid, right?
Yeah,
right. That was the first one.
The second ones were,
and the second one is more clinical.
Yeah,
they're less personal, I think, and
professional
it's
qualities.
Mm-hmm.
What you
integrity, professionalism, communication skills, leadership qualities.
And those are things that I see as kind of a sideline. But if I were evaluating people to try to get them and checking on their teaching skills, or if I wanted to know what they were doing, I would always ask the kids, because kids are pretty brutal. They'll tell you the truth.
They're
One of my kids told me as I was interviewing him, he said, "Yeah, I talked to this one teacher," and I said, "Oh, really?" And he said, "Yeah, she told me about you." And I said, "What do you mean?"
what did I say? I'm just kidding.
And
No.
and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, apparently she had just been in a meeting with you, and she looked at me and said, you're interviewing with him?" And the kid said, "Yeah, I really want to do that." And she said, "Okay, but I don't want you to be upset because he can be brutally honest and he's very blunt and upfront." And the kid said, "That'll work perfectly for me."
Nice.
And so, and so,
Sold.
I had no idea, and that I had that reputation. So, because I really don't really even know that teacher, and I know that this year in a certain meeting, I kind of let loose on the administration, and I was sitting next to
In
that
the same
teacher.
meeting that the teacher was referencing?
No, that one was last year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But in this one, in the meeting this year,
Uh-huh.
she was sitting next to me, and I asked her. I said, "How did I do?" And she said, "You were unbelievably diplomatic."
Oh,
And I thought, okay, I feel good now.
yeah. Validation.
I still made my point, but I think students respond to personalities that are beneficial to them and people that they can work with.
Mhm.
But the overall, linking it back to our question, what makes a great
Yes.
alt ed teacher as opposed to a great mainstream teacher? I mean, all those traits that we said, I want them in both, right? Like,
Yeah, definitely.
you gotta. Sometimes there's a little bit, intensity in one of them than the other, right?
Mhm.
But you gotta.
I think you have a lot more leverage in alternative ed than you do in mainstream ed.
Most certainly.
Yeah, in a lot of areas for sure. Yes.
And I think you have a lot more consensuality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you have a lot more promise of being able to be innovative and to discover new horizons with the students than you can. It's with more facility and ease that you can discover more innovation in what you're doing in alternative ed than you can maybe in mainstream, because you don't have the numbers of pupils and
well, and that can be and that really depends on what kind of teacher you are. If that's a good thing, that if you have a lot of freedom, but you don't, you have, but with that, you have to be creative, and you don't get your own curriculum, as opposed to in a lot of courses, it's like, this is what you're teaching. This is the book you're using because the department has chosen it. And for some teachers are like, yay, I don't have to think about it. And they can just make it their own, versus in alt ed. And like a lot of times with special ed, like, I am creating my own stuff. Right?
Oh, constantly, and it's constantly evolving.
So that's which can be a great thing, but that could be really hard for a lot of teachers. We're like, I have to create all my own stuff, right? So it can be a win, depending on what kind of teacher you are.
It appears to be, when it's all boiled down to one thing, what makes a great alt ed teacher and a good mainstream teacher is that the kids are always put first. That's the quality.
Yes, it's always what's best for the students, and they know that, and that's completely. Thank you, Philip. That was a good place for us to finish.
To wrap, put a bow on it. Nice.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Yes, and we will see you next week. Same educational channel, same educational time.
Perfect.
Adios.
Good night.